There are two different kinds of music, vocal and instrumental. God has spoken in the New Testament concerning the kind of music that we must use if we expect to worship Him in spirit and in truth, and that is singing. And singing is the limit of God's command. God nowhere in the New Testament authorized mechanical instruments of music to be used in the worship of the church. A mechanical instrument of music does not have the ability to worship God. Only with our voices from the heart can we truly sing praises to God. And God does not want to be worshiped with some lifeless instrument. People today may think that it makes no difference if they add instruments of music in their worship to God. But in the Old Testament we have the example of Nadab and Abihu, who were presumptuous in their thinking that it made no difference. In Leviticus 10 verses 1 and 2, we read that Aaron's sons Nadab and Abihu took their censers, put fire in them, and added incense, and they offered unauthorized or strange fire before the Lord, contrary to His command. So fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Then in Leviticus 16:12 through 13, God commanded, "Then he shall take a censer full of burning coals of fire from the altar of burnt offering to burn the incense in the tabernacle." But Nadab and Abihu decided to do it their own way and get the coals of fire from somewhere else. They offered unauthorized fire to God, and they died a horrible death because they did something that God did not authorize. They were presumptuous, and God will not tolerate substitutes for His divine way, and God is very particular about the way that He wants things to be done. Just as Nadab and Abihu offered unauthorized fire, is there any excuse for us to offer any unauthorized thing to the Lord? According to Webster, presumptuous means to take upon oneself without permission or authority, taking too much for granted, showing overconfidence or arrogance. Being presumptuous as far as God is concerned is sin. Psalm 19 and verse 13 says, "Keep back your servant from presumptuous sin. Let them not have dominion over me. Then I shall be blameless, and I shall be innocent of great transgression." So we see that we can also be guilty of presumptuous sin when we take upon ourselves without permission or authority of God and add instruments of music to our worship. Now we may not think that it will make any difference, but Nadab and Abihu thought the same thing. In speaking of people who are displeasing to God, 2 Peter 2 and verse 10 says they are presumptuous and self-willed. Now some may say, well, the Bible does not say that we cannot use instruments of music in worship. But again, are we permitted to be this presumptuous? If so, we could add anything else without the authority of God. The Bible does not tell us that we can substitute something other than unleavened bread and fruit of the vine in commemorating the Lord's Supper. But the Bible also does not say that we cannot use milk and cake. It would be absurd if we tried to make that type of argument, to add that kind of thing. But it's just as absurd when we try to use the same type of reasoning to justify the use of instrumental music in worship. When God tells us something to do, does He also have to come back and give us a list of the things that we're not to do? Well, no, He doesn't. Because when God tells us what He wants us to do, He expects us to do it that way. Not to compromise, not to question, but do it. God's commands are both inclusive and exclusive, and His commands include everything He specifies, and they exclude everything that He has not authorized. But trying to confine ourselves to what God has authorized is very important if we expect to please God and make it to heaven. We must understand that God is interested in the way that we worship Him. We are to worship Him in spirit and in truth, and only in the way that He has authorized us to do so. Friends, we want to thank you for joining us for our program today. We hope that you will consider these things that we've discussed and that you will have a blessed day.